and welcome back to the Garden Podcast. I am so glad that you're joining today. It has been a long while since we have caught up, since we have come to the garden together. Things have been pretty crazy this month. Last month, it's April 1st, so it's a new month now, but I am super excited for today's episode to just get to share a couple stories and some things that I've been learning. Today's episode is going to be about devotion. And I don't mean like a daily devotion, like a devotional, but I mean really breaking down what does it look like to have devotion for the Lord, to devote ourselves to something. So I mentioned that things have been pretty busy lately. One of those things that really occupied my time was that I got to lead a trip to Romania with the organization that I work for. And it was a week of, there were 8 of us, young adult college students, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And I learned so much. I truly got to see a lot, experience a lot, and learn a lot. But something that really stuck out to me, even the first time I went to Romania a couple years ago last year, that stuck out to me again this time was our ministry leaders there. They're absolutely incredible. We have 4 Hope Centers there, and we are currently building a new building from the ground up, and it'll be done hopefully in the fall this year. But we have 4 Hope Centers, and every Hope Center serves a different demographic of kids. So we work with kids living in extreme poverty, and that can look like a whole lot of different things and can mean a lot of different things. But every Hope Center has a different director overseeing it, and then we have one incredible individual who he oversees all of 4 of those Hope Centers. And what sticks out to me about these guys when I first met them was that leading these Hope Centers, rescuing these kids, and doing what they do on a day in, day out basis isn't a job to them. You talk to these guys and they are always smiling. They always carry so much joy. They don't display the weight that this work can have on you, but what sticks out the most is their devotion. So this trip, we're young adults, college age students, and so our translator and our guide for the week was the son of one of our ministry leaders. And he just hung out with us all week. He was our translator and our guide. So as soon as we get to the airport, he's picking us up. We have a really long car ride. Once we landed in Romania, we have a really long car ride to get to our ministry center. And so I got to just kind of hang out with him in the car and ask him some really great questions. And I had met his dad and asked his dad some questions about their story before when I was there previously. But I really learned so much from asking him about their story and to hear his perspective on his parents' devotion to the Lord and his parents' devotion to saying yes to what God had for them. And it's not my story to tell, and maybe someday I'll be able to tell that story on here, but it was so cool to hear how his parents had to make sacrifices and decisions and uncomfortable choices and really, really big sacrifices on behalf of their whole family. And their whole family had to submit to that. And to see where they are now and the fruit that is produced and the way that God has taken their yes and multiplied it isn't unbelievable. But I think what really stuck out to me was to hear the son's point of view and to hear how he wasn't the one making those sacrifices and making those choices, but he's my age, he's 22, and he has an understanding of what it means to be devoted to the Lord, what it means to let your yes be yes and your no be no. And he got to grow up seeing his parents say yes to the Lord, and their yes truly meant yes. And that just really stuck out to me because, again, you see these guys and you see that this work is their whole life. I mean, we have one director that we got to spend, I think like 2 days with him the last time that I was there. And he has the brightest smile you've ever seen. And he's always smiling and he's always laughing. And in terms of numbers, his ministry and his church might not seem like, by our standards, the most successful or the most rapidly growing or multiplying or whatever. But he is so devoted. He's so committed. He has 2 services on a Sunday morning, and then he'll drive into the village to have Bible studies in homes with people. On Sundays, he'll go out and drive and pick up people that are in wheelchairs, that are disabled, or that can't make it, because it would be a day's worth of walking to get there. He goes, he picks them up, he brings them at the end of the services, he drops them off, he sits and eats with them. He'll drive to another village to have a Bible study, he'll drive to another village to have a small group, a discipleship group. And during the week on Monday, he's hosting kids, he's hosting their moms, he's helping them learn English, he's providing meals. On Tuesday, he's hosting church Bible study, and on Wednesday, he's going out and literally rescuing women that are being trafficked in a brothel. And on Thursday, he's hanging out at his church again. And on Friday, he's ministering to his neighbors. And on Saturday, he's going into the Ukraine and providing for refugees and rescuing people that are in a war scenario. And then on Sunday, he does it all over again. I'm telling you that the work they do, their devotion to the Lord, is not a job for them. It's not something that is confined to or compartmentalized to a specific area of their life, but it is their whole life. All of them. It's their whole life. It's their family's life. It's what they do. It's how they see the world. Their yes to the Lord is not just a yes to a position or a yes to a job, but their yes to the Lord is a yes with their entire life. It's a yes with their whole self, their whole being. And that means their families, their marriages, their home lives, where they're living, how they're living, what they do, every choice they make, everything about their life is a reflection of their devotion and their commitment to be obedient to what God's asked of them, and to be enthusiastically jumping in to what God would use them for. And a story that sticks out to me from this last trip I took to Romania is one of our Hope Centers there. The culture of the people group that they serve has a really unfortunate and harsh style of how they treat women. And so a woman could be in an arranged marriage. She gets sold to a man at a very young age, married, have children. Man decides he's done. He can divorce her and go find another woman. And she has to find another husband that will buy her. And she typically can't do so if she has previous kids already. So the kids are abandoned. Woman has to go be sold off to another man in order to continue to provide for those kids, even though she won't get to raise them because they can't come with her. And the cycle just continues over and over and over again. And in this process, these women are sold off to, you can imagine, all sorts of men. And so these situations get really messy and can be very abusive and all sorts of things that we just can't imagine. And so we're building a new Hope Center, and in this Hope Center, we were shown these 2 secret rooms in the back of the building where they're behind the kitchen, they're tucked away, where our team there is dedicated to helping these women, and these women that come out in emergency scenarios and need a place to hide for a couple days can go to that room. They can bring their kids and stay in that room for a few days until things have blown over and they have a game plan and have an opportunity to take some next steps. And our director was saying how he lets his wife take over that part of the ministry because these families and these men, they come knocking at his door demanding answers. And he says to us, he says, my loophole is that if I don't know the answers, I can honestly tell them that I don't know. And so his wife handles all of it so that he can maintain integrity in telling these men that he has no idea where the girls are, while still knowing that they're being taken care of. And that struck me because that is a level of devotion to not just being obedient to what God's asked of him, but to do it well and to be a good steward of that by being able to maintain his integrity, but still be able to rescue these girls like he believes God has asked him to. It's just their whole life. It's just how they function. We were told a story of when, just a few days before we arrived, the president of our organization, him and his wife went into the Ukraine with our ministry leaders from Romania that go in there all the time to provide resources, supplies, host services, and do some evangelism out there, and just care for people that are walking through some really difficult things after the war, which is still going on. And they were telling us a story of how they were staying in a hotel in a small town overnight, and middle of the night, the raid sirens, like the bomb sirens, start going off. And so my boss and his wife, they get into the basement and they're kind of freaking out, like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And none of the ministry leaders, like none of our team, was in the basement with them. And she goes, well, are you going to go get them? And he goes, nuh-uh, they're big boys. They can come down here themselves if they need shelter. And once everything had blown over, a couple hours later, they go out and he's asking them, he finds them, and he's like, hey, you guys weren't in the basement. And they were like, why would we go in the basement? And he was like, the sirens went off. And they were like, oh, we didn't notice. And basically they go in to the Ukraine and they do this stuff all the time, that they have gotten used to hearing the sirens and gotten used to it being a false alarm. And it's just what they do. Like, being there and doing that kind of ministry and being in an active war zone is just such a part of what they do that it didn't even faze them. They just kept on doing what they were doing. And so I just really have been thinking about that a lot. I think that my time in Romania, my time getting to see them, getting to know their kids who are my age and getting to spend time with them, and seeing how they live and how they do ministry, and hearing the testimonies of what God has done in their lives and in their families, and seeing the evidence of that in the kids that are a part of these hope centers and the way that their lives are transformed because of the obedience of one family, has really stuck with me. And so today I really want to jump into that theme of devotion, because I think that in our current culture, in our society, in our context, it is so rare to see an individual or a family. It's so rare to see people be truly devoted to something. It makes me think a lot about social media and TikTok and Instagram and the whole influencing thing, and even just being online in general. There are constant trends that are changing. There's a constant changing of who's famous, or who are we listening to, or who are we watching, or what show, or what actor, what actress, what movie, what influencer. We are in a culture and in a context of constant change. And it's rare to see someone be truly devoted to just one thing. I just kind of sat back and I wonder that in a culture of constant change, of constant chasing, constant striving for the views, the likes, the follows, the attention, the free stuff, the cheapest deal, the best way to fit in with the trends, the coolest place to travel to, the best picture opportunity, the most photographable moment, in a culture of constant change, of constant chasing and constant striving, what would it look like if we, as followers of Jesus, became so devoted to him above all else? Like, how different would the world around us look? How different would the people in our circles look? How differently would people feel loved and treated if we were to become a people so devoted to Jesus above all else? Also thought a lot about a passage in scripture that we actually talked about on that trip to Romania, and recently on a phone call with all the directors of our hope centers around the world. Along this theme of devotion is the passage where Jesus says to a man, he says, follow me. And he says in response, he says, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus says to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and preach the kingdom of God. And we kind of talked about how Jesus isn't being insensitive there. He's not saying that taking care of your family doesn't matter, or that you can't bury your dad, you can't honor your parents. He's not being insensitive there, but he is kind of getting to the point of, man, what really matters most to you? Where do your priorities lie? What does your perspective say about how you live for me? And it kind of goes hand in hand with an episode I have previously released about how following Jesus will cost you something. And I think that's kind of what Jesus is getting at here, that it's not going to be easy, that you're going to have to make hard sacrifices, but that, man, if we can keep our priorities in view and in line, things are different. And I think he's getting at a willingness. He really wants to know how willing we would be to follow him, even if the cost was high or the cost was uncomfortable. There's a song that I have loved for a very long time. It's called Devotion by North Point Worship, and Sean Curran sings it. It just, every line in that song gets my heart in a healthy, good posture of willingness. And there is a section of the bridge where he says, "You deserve this whole jar of perfume." I'll just read some of the lyrics. It's a really beautiful song. He says, "I want to pour out all my devotion. Every drop I have is yours. Nothing is wasted. Here in your presence, I'll bring you more and more and more." And then in the bridge, he says, "If I'm in, I'm going all in. I was made for the deep end. There's nothing more precious than you. I want to stay a little longer. I'm going to stay a little longer. You deserve this whole jar of perfume." And I love that perfume line because it is referring to a passage in Matthew 26 where, I'll read it. It says that while Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured out on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." Aware of this, I love that, like the audacity. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." What sticks out to me in how this correlates with the song is that this woman didn't hold back, that she poured out the entire bottle of perfume, knowing that she could have done anything else with it. Like the disciples said, she could have sold it because it was worth so much. She could have gotten money from it. She probably could have used it. She could have saved it. It would have increased in value. She could have done literally anything else with it. But the significance it held for her to pour out something of value before Jesus and to not withhold any of it is what I think gets me. That it is not her devotion, her pouring out this gift, her anointing him and preparing him was wholehearted. She didn't hold back. And that's something that I think the Lord taught me a lot last year, was this idea of wholehearted commitment, especially when it comes to the Lord, because he's so worthy of it that it's not worth doing things for him to do them half-heartedly. And so I look at this woman and the way that she poured out this perfume before Jesus, and I think there's a lot we can learn from that. Because again, we live in a culture of constant change, and we don't see people that are truly devoted to something. I think that that's why there is this giant inflated culture of how we see and perceive pastors, pastors of large churches, that it's easy for us to put these leaders on a pedestal because they are devoted. They're so devoted. And that's why it's hard when they leave, or when roles change, or when, we find out that things are different behind the scenes because we have placed them on a pedestal for being so devoted to just one thing. And I think that there's something to be said about that why are we not able to be devoted to things that way? Like, why is a wholehearted commitment, a wholehearted devotion so challenging for us? And I think that's a question worth asking. And I want to share 3 things that I've been learning about this theme of devotion. The first I've already touched on, and it's that it will cost you something. Again, refer to my episode about following Jesus will cost you something. To be devoted to something wholeheartedly, to devote your whole life to something, will cost you, and it won't be easy. One of my best friends and I were just talking today about the sacrifices that we have to make in order to prepare ourselves for the future, to deny our flesh, to die to ourselves, to be in submission to God, that those things are not easy, and sometimes they hurt and they don't feel good, and it's not our it's not what we want to do. It's not our desire. It's not what our flesh wants. It's not what the world around us is telling us, that we have to make such a conscious choice to do things differently. That kind of devotion will cost you something, and it won't be easy. It might come naturally to you to want to make that sacrifice. I think that's something I've learned about myself, that the desire to be devoted to the Lord in that way, the desire to give him my yes, the desire to be obedient, to be a good steward of what he's instilled in me is very natural. But that doesn't mean that it's easy, because I can say with certainty that the sacrifices the Lord has asked me to make have not been easy. My devotion has cost me something, and I know that that's true for all of us because Jesus himself tells us that in Scripture. So the first thing I've learned about devotion is that it will cost you something. The second thing I've learned is that it will be worth it. Again, I see this so clearly in our directors in Romania, that before they had our organization alongside them, before they had the adequate funding or the resources or the supplies or materials, that they have just been obedient. They've been faithful. They've just said yes. And they have poured out their whole devotion before the Lord. And it cost them a lot. It cost them a whole lot. It cost them their comfort. It cost them secure wages. It cost them comfortable living. It cost them their pride. It cost them a lot to live in devotion to the Lord the way that they have. But on this end of that many years of devotion, I can step in and see that God has absolutely honored that devotion, and he has used it. That he certainly does have a plan that is far greater than anything they could have asked, thought, or imagined, because he is using their obedience and their devotion to rescue kids by the dozens, to give kids a future as followers of Jesus, to give kids the hope of Jesus. He has absolutely honored their devotion and used it, and it's evident. And so that's something that I've learned about devotion, is that it will cost you something, but that God sees that. He honors it and he uses it, and it will be worth it. But the tricky part about that is the third thing I've learned about devotion. The third thing I've learned is that it can't be conditional. While it will be worth it, it can't be conditional, because especially in the line of work that I'm in and that these guys in Romania I've talked about are in, these are scenarios where we don't always get to see the fruit of it. In fact, rarely do we get to see and harvest the results and the fruit of our devotion, our obedience, and what God is doing in these lives. So what I've learned is that it can't be conditional, because we may never get to see the results. We may never get to see what God does with it, and we have to make a choice to say that it will still be worth doing, even if we never get to see the results. And I think that's kind of something that I have come to terms with. I've had to process on my own, but that I think is worth asking. And I think that's why in our culture we don't see people fully devoted to things, because we live in a world of instant gratification and we live in a world of instant results. And the idea of being devoted to something, that you would commit yourself to something, that you would commit your whole, spend your whole life doing something that you may never see the result of, sounds impossible and sounds like it would make no sense if you think about the culture that we live in. And that's why these guys stand out, because they have made the choice to say, man, even if I never see the results of this, I trust that my God will use it in whatever way he pleases, however he sees fit. So their devotion isn't conditional, and I think that's why it's lasting, because they don't say, God, I will do this if you let me reap the benefits of it, if you let me see the results of it. There is no if. They just say, God, I will do this because you are who you say you are. I will do this because you have asked me to, and you are worthy of my yes and my obedience and my devotion. So devotion will cost you something, and that cost will definitely be worth it. But your devotion cannot be conditional. Our devotion can't be conditional, because the minute that it becomes conditional, we will be less inclined to give it unless we know that we're guaranteed something out of it. And frankly, we're not entitled to receiving anything just because we follow Jesus and we're obedient to him. But I know that that's not easy because, again, it has cost me something. It has absolutely been worth it when I have gotten to see the results, but it's also been worth it when I haven't gotten to see the results. And this was a really cool takeaway for me on my last trip to Romania. I'll kind of close with this thought. I walked into that week of ministry in Romania not too long ago, really just hoping to get by, hoping to steward well this opportunity and the people that I was entrusted with, and step into what was asked of us and do it well and leave and call it good. I really was not anticipating. The Lord showed up in ways far beyond what I could have asked, thought, or imagined. Truly, truly, truly. And one of those ways was really just deeply encouraging me and confirming my calling, confirming the job I'm in, the role I'm in, the dreams I have, the goals I have, the things that I believe he's promised me he'll do. He gave me this absolute complete confirmation that I am in the right place. I'm taking the right steps. I'm doing it with the right heart, and that he will be faithful to do the things that he promised me, and we're only just beginning. Like, that week was just the first fruits of what he has yet to come, and it was so encouraging. It was such great food for my soul and for my spirit. And as I was processing that with one of my mentors, we really kind of just talked about the Lord's kindness and how, again, in a culture where I think even in Christian culture, man, we chase these spiritual highs. I see people that go from mission trip to mission trip to mission trip to mission trip, looking to continue to chase that feeling that it gives them. I see students whose faith is built around camp after winter retreat, after fall retreat, after camp, chasing these emotional experiences, these spiritual highs. And there's a lot to be said about that. But what the Lord really reminded me of, and what I can in hindsight see the Lord was doing in his kindness to reveal those things to me, was that I have been putting in the work. I have been doing my best to be faithful and to be a good steward of what he's placed in my hands. And I've been doing that without needing to feel that spiritual high or to chase after that kind of affirmation and that kind of encouragement, but just faithfully saying, all right, God, you've asked this of me, and so I'm going to do it. And starting to understand what that devotion looks like for me. And then for the Lord and his kindness to give me such clear encouragement and affirmation that reminded me, man, had I not gotten that, I would have come home and continued to pour out that devotion. Like, nothing would have changed for me. But yet in his kindness, he chose to give me that. He chose to give me that kind of encouragement and affirmation to continue to push me forward. And he didn't have to. And he knows that he didn't have to give me that, but he chose to. And it means so much to me. Like, what a gift, what a kind, kind gift it is for the Lord to give us encouragement and affirmation and to empower us forward. That's a couple of my takeaways from my recent trip to Romania. I hope to share a lot more about it. There is so much that the Lord did and so much that I learned and saw that is worth being told. But for today, I want us to really think about that idea of why is that kind of devotion so challenging for us? What is keeping us from being a people that are fully devoted to the Lord and fully devoted to what he asks of us? What's keeping us from that? Why aren't we able to give him our yes? And how different would the world around us look if we were able to do that? So whatever is keeping you from that, man, I'm praying for you. I'm praying that the Lord makes that clear to you and that he gives you the courage and empowerment by the strength of his spirit to be able to say yes to those things. I'm really grateful that you stuck around and listened to my thoughts today. Hopefully something I shared stuck with you, whether a story or a takeaway or a passage of scripture. I just hope that the Lord is at work in your life and he is at work teaching you something about what it means to be truly devoted to him, no matter the cost. That our devotion to him would be unconditional because it'll be worth it even though it will cost us something. So I hope you took something away from this episode today. If you did, feel free to reach out and let me know. I love hearing stories of how the Lord speaks to you, and I'm super grateful for you being here today. Thanks so much for coming to the garden. We'll see you next time.